Hi everyone, I've literally just finished co-hosting a webinar with Debbie Hepplewhite and Glennie, where we were talking about this concept of the maths of the phonics. So I wanted to come and make you a quick video that's like a little summary of the key concepts of this idea of maths of the phonics. So why is this an important concept? Well, thinking about the maths of the phonics is about being able to visualise the phonics diet of individual children. So literally imagining that you're stepping into the shoes of a child and thinking about what does their daily diet of phonics look like? What is their provision? And then quantifying. So we're literally applying maths. We're quantifying and thinking about how much time is spent on that lesson, within that lesson, across the week, how much practice, so within that time frame, whether your lesson is 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour or more, how much actual practice does each child get? And it's not about having definitive answers. So it's not about me presenting you with the exact, quantity that is the magic number. It's about being reflective and evaluative over the materials that you use, the time restrictions you might have on your timetable, and making it work for each and every child. So that idea of working smarter, not working harder, and I think that's where we're at with phonics these days. Most people are au fait with what good phonics looks like. Most people could describe to you a good basic phonics lesson, and now we're at next generation, next level. We're unpicking phonics lessons to really look at what works and what doesn't work and make sure we're helping every child in the class. I'd like to give you a little example. This is called the Snowflake example. So I was on a consultancy in a school and I was doing a learning walk and I was looking at teachers delivering phonics lessons, and I watched this young teacher in a year one class, and she was a really good teacher. She was clearly very organised. She clearly had a great relationship with the children. She clearly knew her stuff when it comes to her phonics subject knowledge, and she had about 30 year ones. And she did her revisit and review using some graphene flashcards, so she was showing the cards and they were saying the sounds, and that was fine. And then she did a teach section, and she was very good. She delivered the teaching part of the lesson in a very nice way, no problem with that. And then it came to the practice session. And for the practice session, she wanted them to play a game called the Snowflake game. And she asked all the children to get into a big circle. So this is about 30 children now, 35-year-olds getting into a big circle. A bit of a squash and a squeeze, but they were really beautifully behaved children. And then she had strips of paper, so A4 sheets of paper cut into strips, and on each strip was a word, printed word. And the idea behind the game is that she would go into the middle of the circle, she would drop the strips of paper and they would sprinkle down like snowflakes, and the children would reach in, take a strip, and then they would have a word to read. Now, in reality, what happened is that the first time she went into the middle, she said, "Now, children, nobody move until I've said move." And of course, the minute she dropped the paper, they all went to move. So she had to say, "No, I didn't mean yet. Everybody sit back, let's try it again." And the time is ticking by now, and the children are not getting on with any actual practicing. But they were really sweet and really well behaved, and they sat back down and waited. She gathered up all the papers and she dropped them and sprinkled again and said, "Well, off you go and get your paper." And they leant into the middle and they pulled out a little strip of paper and they sat back down. And then she proceeded to go round the circle, one at a time, taking turns to listen to each child read their word aloud to the class. And can you imagine how long that took for each child to read one word? So in that stretch of lesson, however long it was, I don't specifically remember, but it was a long time, the children, 29 of them, were always just sat there listening and waiting patiently whilst one child read one word. So in that lesson, you have to ask yourself, how much practice did each child really get? And I suggest that it wasn't really very much practice at all. Now, that activity was not that teacher's fault. That was a good teacher. She was doing a good job with those children. All the right elements were in place. But somewhere along the line, she had this idea that this game would be fun and engaging, and she'd read about this or she'd learnt about this activity somewhere else. And I suspect that probably it was intended that perhaps the children read the word to themselves and then passed the paper round to the right, and they each passed the papers and they would each read then 30 words, perhaps. But like I say, the teacher hadn't realised, and this is where we're at, applying this concept of the maths of the phonics. How many words are children being exposed to? So the problems in that activity, to summarise, were you have to weigh up how long it took to explain the game, how long it took to organise the children to be able to do the game, how long did it take to do the game, versus how many words did each child get to read. And if it was just one word, that's a really, good example of an obvious imbalance of time versus practice. Now, this is only one example, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. And another example I'd like you to give you to think about is, imagine 2 schools or 2 classes. It might even be if you have a school where you have more than one class in each age group, so you have 2 formentary or 3 formentary. Imagine that in one class, every day in the phonics lesson, the teacher uses about 4 words with the children. In the teach part of the lesson, that teacher uses 4 words, and they read the words on the board, and they might write the words on the little whiteboard, so 4 words. And then the children go to do an activity of whatever description for their practice, and in the activity there are 4 words. So the children in that class per lesson have had 8 words, and that's hoping that they are 8 different words. And quite often I see that the 4 words used in the teach part of the lesson are the exact same words used in the practice part of the session, so they only had 4 words. But let's say they had 8 words. Now compare that to the children in the parallel class, whose teacher, because of just the way they are, the way they planned, just the way it is, they used 8 words. 8 words in their teach part of the lesson. So 8 words for the children to read. Perhaps they read word cards on an interactive whiteboard, on a regular whiteboard, whatever. They read 8 words. And maybe they wrote 8 words on a whiteboard. They went to have their practice game or practice activity or practice whatever they're doing, and they had a different 8 words. So that's 16 words. So compare 8 words to 16 words, and we're looking at double the content. Now imagine that multiplied by 5 lessons a week, by 36 weeks in an academic year, across 2 years, so reception or P1 into year 1/P2. Imagine the difference in quantity. That's a big quantity. But it isn't even about specifically the number of words. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that the maths of the phonics is about packing more words. It's about the appropriacy. So actually, you might deem that at some parts of the year, for some activities with some children, more words or less words, or in the middle amount of words. But actually this idea of little and often opportunities, multiplying that opportunity and making sure it happens every day. Because again, the maths of the phonics. There are many schools that I go into that are not doing phonics on 5 days of the week. And like any sort of habit, like when we all talk about getting fit and starting a new exercise regime, unless you do it every single day consistently, you're not going to see the improvement. And it's exactly the same with phonics. Now, to get a little bit controversial, what I'd like you to do with thinking about the maths of the phonics is apply this to whatever framework or program you are using. So you need to be evaluative. Does your program or your framework give you enough words for day in, day out, day after day, week after week, term after term? Or do they not give you that many words? In which case, where are you getting your words from and your sentences from? Does your framework have mapped out consistent phonics teaching across that 2-year period, across the reception year and the year 1 year? Is there enough phonics being mapped out for you? Or is there actually very little phonics content and you're expected to kind of repeat it and go around the cycles again? And of course, we all recognise children who are getting stuck in that cycle of repeating the same low-level content and not moving on from that fast enough. And lots of us are doing work around lowest 20% to try and move these children on. Well, actually, how supportive is your programme or your framework for mapping this out for you, for ensuring that the maths of the phonics is consistently provided for day after day, week after week, term after term, year after year. And where does the accountability for this lie? So we could say, well, it's the teacher in the classroom, they're the ones delivering the lessons. But actually, for many teachers, the teacher only knows what the teacher knows. So the teacher knows what the programme tells them, what the framework tells them, what any kind of social media or information online tells them, maybe what colleagues tell them, maybe what they learnt on a training course. But actually, in some respects, that information that they have is limited to their experience. And actually, in the world of sort of consultants travelling around many, many schools, we can build up this bigger picture about how things look across different schools, and we're able to point out to people, well, hang on, look at the maths of the phonics in your school, look at how much you are doing or you aren't doing, and we can compare it with other schools and see how much they are or are not doing. So teachers do have an accountability and responsibility, but it's not on their shoulders. We need to be coming together and working together in the education industry to support this idea. Is it school leaders? Yes. Also, to an extent, it's school leaders to take more responsibility in what goes on in phonics and really be asking these questions and engaging with this next level train of thought of things like the maths of the phonics. And is it programme and framework writers? Yes, because actually what many of you out there on the ground won't realise is that the people who write the programmes and the frameworks are just people. They're just people. We're all the same, you and I, we're just people. It's just that some of us have become super, super nerdy about it and, had a go at putting it into a programme. But I think you need to see that there's a human side to that and there's room for error. And that actually sometimes when a programme or a framework might be presented to you, it isn't necessarily the best content, the best quality that it could possibly be. So I'm super, super passionate about getting as much information spread as widely as possible. I'm super passionate about upskilling everybody that works with phonics, that works in education, to think about these issues, and to make you all really, really evaluative actually of what you do in school and the materials that you use. And I'll leave you with a final thought, the sort of key message of this webinar that we did this evening, which is actually just to have in your mind, at the forefront of your mind, this idea of the maths of the phonics. Is it making sense? Can we do more little and often? Do we need to be using more words? Are we doing phonics consistently 5 days a week, or is that slipping sometimes? And does our phonics provision map out over just a few weeks, really, and we just repeat it over and over? Or does our phonics teaching and provision map out properly over the terms and over the years? So that's my thoughts today on the maths of the phonics. If you have any questions, by all means get in touch. I will put my email and my website links in the comment section below. And maybe next time you'll join us on one of our webinars. Check Twitter for those. Okay, thanks.